Well, thank you very much. Let me invite you to the second plenary session of this year's Manama Dialogue on the theme Navigating Global Competition. That was a theme that we put on the agenda when the overarching subject of the Manama Dialogue was intended to be the risks and opportunities of strategic diversification. And we identified that as an important subject because many of the countries of the region, including in the GCC, were experimenting with a wider variety of economic, diplomatic, and strategic partners after long periods of engaging, perhaps principally with European and North American states. There was a much stronger impulse to improve economic cooperation, strengthen trade, establish more intense diplomacy, and even develop security arrangements with countries of the East, Japan, China, ASEAN, Australia, others. Some of the countries in this region were also wanting to pay much greater attention to Africa, especially given rising challenges in the Sahel of counterterrorism, to which we've also returned, a tragedy that is taking place also to the south of Europe that affects European countries. Sometimes if you don't navigate global competition well, all you're ending up doing is managing a great deal of migration internationally of people needing to seek safety and asylum. And so all these debates have become part again of the domestic politics of European states. We have a fantastic panel here. I'm delighted, of course, that the first speaker in a moment in this panel will be Dr. Abdulatif bin Rashid Al Zayani, the Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Bahrain and our principal partner in supporting this Manama Dialogue. An old personal friend of mine, and of course the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Dr. Anwar Gargash, who had a long career as Minister of State in the United Arab Emirates and is now the diplomatic advisor to the President, Mohammed bin Zayed, in the UAE, and Dr. Tobias Lindner, Minister of State of the Federal Foreign Office in Germany. A delight always to have Germany here because the IISS is now a resident power in Germany with our office in Paris-sur-Platz, which gives us access within about 2 or 3 minutes both to the Bundestag and to the Chancellor's office, so we have many useful conversations there. So with that series of prefatory remarks that have settled the room, could I invite Dr. Abdulatif bin Rashid Al Zayani to make his remarks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sir John. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Your Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you to this year's Manama Dialogue, when in these most difficult of regional and international circumstances, we reaffirm the practical value and importance of engaging in sincere and meaningful dialogue. By doing so, we are actively seeking solutions to all the issues and challenges that lie before us, to create opportunities for genuine peace, stability, and prosperity in the days and years ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, the focus of our session is navigating global competition. As regions and the Gulf and Middle East have endured a long and often troubled history, filled with negative repercussions of such competition. Over centuries, nations both within and beyond the Middle East have competed for land, resources, and influence, using the full range of political, diplomatic, economic, and military means. Consequently, the region and its peoples have endured endless conflicts, instability, and unimaginable human suffering, thereby depriving them of the opportunity to fully realize their potential. Today, this competition persists, And if anything, it has grown even more complex, more dynamic, and more pervasive than ever before. Indeed, it may be hardwired into our human psyche, such that it is a core instinct to engage in competition with others. The question is how to channel this competition in a constructive manner that fuels innovation, growth, and progress. How can we ensure that we do not lag behind, while also ensuring that we don't leave others behind? How can we strike a balance between our national interests and our global responsibilities? How can we foster a more inclusive, resilient, and peaceful world? And in the broader international context, we must also ask how, as individual nations and societies, we can steer competition among both regional and global actors towards cooperation rather than conflict. It is vital that we recognize the immense value and potential that lies in fostering collaborative efforts as opposed to perpetuating a destructive cycle of antagonism. I believe there are two fundamental preconditions necessary to achieve this objective. Firstly, we need a framework of shared principles and values that can guide the actions of all parties involved. The Kingdom of Bahrain has always believed in the importance of mutual respect, dialogue, and tolerance. These values are crucial in navigating global competition and creating peace, stability, and prosperity, not only in our region, but also beyond. They not only help us maintain good relations with our neighbors and partners, but also shape our constructive engagement with the wider international community. Based on these core values, we establish principles like respect for national sovereignty, non-interference in the internal affairs, and adherence to international law and the United Nations Charter. These values and principles serve as a compass for nations, guiding us through the ever-changing landscape of global competition. Within or with new actors, alliances, and dynamics emerging every day, they provide a stable reference point in times of unprecedented change. From the rise of emerging economies to the rapid spread of digital technologies and the challenges of globalization and resilience of supply, these values and principles help us navigate such challenges and find common ground. If we can promote and advocate for these values and principles on a global scale, demonstrating their importance to all states, societies, and peoples, I believe that we can redirect competition in a positive direction in our region and beyond. By doing so, we will show the international relations are not a zero-sum game, but an opportunity for cooperation and collaboration, leading to mutual benefits and shared solutions. Secondly, to successfully navigate global competition, it is crucial to have a compelling long-term vision for our region and a clear understanding of the core elements needed for a more peaceful, stable, and prosperous future. While the challenges in the Middle East are deep-rooted and complex, it is possible to identify key themes and issues that must be addressed to deliver a better future. One of the most important issues is finding a lasting resolution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The horrors of this conflict continue to unfold before our eyes. And His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince and Prime Minister, highlighted the dire situation in Gaza in his keynote speech last night, during which he condemned both Hamas and Israel for their parts in it which have led to the death of too many innocent civilians. For us to put an end to this latest escalation, we must, as His Royal Highness stressed, achieve a break in hostilities and allow the provision of urgent humanitarian aid and basic services, and release innocent civilians being held hostage. And we must all work together to end this war. His Royal Highness also outlined the way for us going forward, which stated clearly that a resolution requires a two-state solution that recognizes and fulfills the aspirations of the Palestinian people for a viable, secure, and independent state where they can pursue their social and economic development. It involves also acknowledging and ensuring Israel's security concerns, as without this, the region will remain on the brink of conflict and instability. In this context, we call for an international peace conference, as the Joint Arab and Islamic Summit called for, and the effective leadership of the United States, under the effective leadership of the United States, which will be crucial in this regard, through which we can initiate a credible peace process that could lead to such an outcome. If we do not adhere to diplomacy and dialogue and allow the continued violation of international law, and for countries to resort to the use of military force, the erosion of the rules-based global order will continue, and we risk the spread of further violence and instability across the world. Additionally, it is crucial to address the presence of non-state actors across the region. These groups contribute to instability, sectarianism, and tension. Disarming them and reducing their influence will promote the rule of law, strengthen state institutions, and foster inclusive governance, creating a more stable and secure environment for all. Lastly, building interdependence between regional states is vital for a stable and secure Middle East. By promoting economic integration, joint ventures, trade, and cross-border collaborations, the peoples of the region can benefit from shared resources, expertise, and opportunities. This interdependence will contribute to the overall prosperity of the region, promoting peaceful coexistence, discouraging conflict, and addressing socio-economic disparities. The Kingdom of Bahrain has consistently worked to implement all these themes, values, and ideas through its diplomatic and foreign policy, regionally in the context of GCC integration, and also at the international level, as demonstrated most recently by the signing of the Bahrain-US Comprehensive Security Integration and Prosperity Agreement, CCPA. Dear colleagues and friends, although there is no simple or easy answer to how best to navigate the issues raised by global competition, I firmly believe that the principles I have outlined can serve as a blueprint for nations as they seek to address and overcome these challenges and to seize the opportunities that arise. Further, these principles can also steer our collective endeavors as a global community towards resolving the conflicts that plague our world. We must therefore embrace and act upon these themes so that we can forge a brighter future for all, and in particular for those young individuals within our region, especially the Palestinians, who yearn for a beacon of hope to extinguish the flames of anger and vengeance ignited by wars. Together, through our shared efforts as an international community, I am certain that we can do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul Latif. And I think many people will have noted your epigrammatic remark that Gulf countries need to ensure that they do not lag behind while we do not leave others behind, which I think was an important statement of strategic empathy. You also mentioned a call for an international peace conference on the current problem in the Middle East, and I'm sure now and later today we will find out whether there is full international consensus to have an international peace conference as the best instrument to bring this conflict to an end and a better future for all. With that, could I ask Anwar Gargash to take the floor? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to say that I'm very grateful for being invited and being here in the Kingdom of Bahrain, and also to be here in the IISS 19th dialogue. It's really extraordinary to have your 19th and soon to celebrate our 20th dialogue. I also want to say that I am looking forward to our discussion following these prepared remarks, but it's precursory that we give these prepared remarks. So I want to just start by saying that we, through this dialogue, this forum offers us an important platform to share our perspectives on regional and global security dynamics. I believe conversations like these are very valuable, particularly at such a critical juncture in our region in light of the current war in Gaza with unprecedented violence and carnage. This has caused a serious humanitarian crisis and calls into question aspirations for stability in our region and brings new strategic challenges to the global stage. While perhaps it is too early to know how this crisis will impact the trajectory of regional and international relations, it is important to acknowledge that it will have strong ramifications for years to come. The unfolding situation in Gaza raises questions about the future of the international system, about the protection of international norms, about our values, and about whether our usual approaches for problem solving are working. Some of these approaches clearly require serious examination. For example, the policy of containment, which has characterized the Palestinian issue for so long, has clearly failed. As the events of the past month have shown, it would be a costly mistake to fail to re-engage politically on a peace process framework to achieve a two-state solution. Borders, refugees, East Jerusalem have to be sorted out. Containment has failed. This outcome will bring a promise of lasting peace. We hope will bring a promise of lasting peace to the Palestinian and Israeli people, and will require strong and sustained international engagement. I'd like to spend a few moments on the topic of our session, which is navigating global competition. In my last remarks here at the Manama Dialogue in 2019, I spoke about how we were about to enter the 2020s with a global order that was very fluid, a global order that seemed to lack a clear direction, a global order where the potential for increased competition among major powers was growing, including in the Middle East. Just a few months later, COVID-19 pandemic spread around the world, adding an extra layer of uncertainty to the global strategic context and shaking the global economy. The war in Ukraine also adds to the geopolitical uncertainty, with its knock-on effects on the entire global economy, food and energy security. It's led to greater divisions between the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, making consensus even more difficult to reach on key issues related to peace and security in the world. Similarly, the initial deadlock in the UN Security Council over the strategic situation in Gaza, which lasted for several weeks, despite an emerging consensus in the UN General Assembly about what needed to happen next, reflects this fragmented international landscape. These shifts have significant repercussions on international relations and point to what could become a larger crisis of the international order if we do not take steps to correct this course. They are also compounded by broader systemic trends, such as climate change, the nature of our very interconnected modern world, and the political, economic, and security effects of competition in the world, in the technological sphere. The way we navigate these trends will shape our future. Now, I'd like to underscore a couple of important points with respect to the shifting dynamics in global politics and the Middle East. The Middle East is very familiar with geopolitical competition playing out in its regional order. In fact, one of the key challenges we confront is the shifting dynamics of global politics. We understand only too well that a more turbulent international order will inevitably cascade down to affect our region. This is something we have to deal with, whether it is concerns about how the geopolitical competition between major powers unfolds in the Middle East, a competition we do not wish to be defined by, or questions about how the international system will look like the day after the wars in Ukraine and the Gaza Strip, and the sort of various yardstick that has been used in the two conflicts happening at the same time. Transition to an increasingly divided international system is not in anyone's interest, nor is increased uncertainty across the Middle East, a region that has recently experienced its most difficult decade with the so-called Arab Spring, and where the risk of escalation and rise in power vacuums is a consistent threat. This leads me to another point I wanted to make, which is that at this uncertain time in global and regional affairs, and in a world marked by rapid changes and increasing competition, it is imperative that the Middle East continue to carefully chart a course to ensure stability, prosperity, and peace for our nation. We've seen some promising signs in the last few years, as Middle Eastern states have been working together to find solutions to de-escalate conflicts, rebuild relations, focus on common goals. And despite this progress being uneven, we had renewed hopes that the Middle East will be charting a new path for the years to come. The war in Gaza represents a serious setback, no doubt about it, to de-escalation efforts in the wider region. The longer it lasts, the higher the risks are that the war will spread regionally, and that the current violence will only breed more violence and fuel greater radicalization in the region. I wonder sometimes if this is another Iraq moment, to be honest. We must prevent narratives of division from taking hold in the region and confront extremism in all its forms. While we continue to work hard towards a cessation of hostilities, the immediate priority is to achieve sustained and unrestricted humanitarian access to Gaza and substantial relief to alleviate the suffering of civilians in Gaza. In response to this acute need, the UAE has significantly stepped up our humanitarian efforts to support the people of Gaza, not just by increasing our financial commitments, but also by working in solidarity with medical teams in Gaza to set up an emergency field hospital there, and by taking children from Gaza to the UAE for medical treatment. Last night we saw images of the first 90 injured children being airlifted to Abu Dhabi, and this is part of our commitment to take 1,000 of the injured children in Gaza with their families in order to be treated in Abu Dhabi. This is, of course, a drop in the ocean of what Gaza needs in terms of the images that we see of the carnage and the human suffering. But we have to all work together in order to make the humanitarian effort significant and sustainable. The last point I would like to make is that now is also the time to look to the future and ask some deep, probing questions. Can we maintain a forward-looking momentum despite regional crises? And in light of the war in Gaza and its implications, can we work together to find lasting solutions to de-escalate the current tensions in the Middle East? I believe the answer to these questions is we must resolutely continue on a path to defend regional stability, and that requires that we need to go beyond containment. As we address the current crisis in Gaza, we need to continue efforts to repair the region, including by advancing our national plans to ensure progress and through collaborative efforts with global and regional partners to develop long-term strategies for the region. The need for reliable partners in the region is key. This requires a process of problem solving rather than containment, because crucially, there are issues in the region that need sustainable solutions. The lack of an enduring solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, but also other ongoing crises, socioeconomic disparities, and the aspirations for peace and prosperity of young people across the region. While some of these issues still seem out of reach, they must be addressed to bring greater stability to the Middle East. Let me conclude by reiterating the UAE's commitment to the security and stability of our region, as well as our resolve to continue working with friends and partners on an agenda of shared prosperity in the region. In doing so, we will continue to prioritize de-escalation, partnerships, diplomacy, and our enhanced focus on geoeconomics, because economic resilience is fundamental to the well-being of our nations and to the goals of achieving a shared stability that benefits us all. If we can successfully pursue these goals through inclusive, cooperative approaches with regional and international partners, I believe that we can improve regional security and lay the groundwork for a more prosperous and peaceful Middle East in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anwar. On the current conflict, we all take note of 3 points. 1, containment has failed. 2, it's important to confront the narratives of division. And 3rd, if I got it right, and I think it's important, that strategic initiatives for the region must come in greater measure from the region, which I think has been an important characteristic of UAE diplomacy recently. And finally, your concluding emphasis on geoeconomics, something on which the IISS is working ever more strongly with this region. By the way, I should advertise that the IISS has published recently an excellent study on Gulf bailout diplomacy, which is one of the best assessments of the way in which Gulf countries has engaged geoeconomically with countries of need in the region and beyond. And with that, Tobias, could you please take the podium? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, esteemed colleagues. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to lay out some thoughts from the German perspective on how to best navigate global affairs in our time of turmoil. I was asked to talk about global competition. Usually, I would now go on and talk about China and the US, global systemic competition. You all know these issues. But honestly, I feel that given the unbearable current situation in Israel and Palestine, I would rather focus on what we are facing in the world in terms of aggression and terror. From a Berlin perspective, we are facing multiple serious challenges. I very well remember how last year, during this established conference, Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine was in all of our minds. It has shaken the European peace order to its very foundations. It is shocking to think that today this war goes on for 633 days. 633 days of innocent people dying, of livelihoods senselessly destroyed by the Russian aggressor. From a distance, and the longer the war is dragging on, this may seem like a European or purely Western problem. But as all of you in this room are well aware, it's not. It has directly affected the food supply in large parts of the world, as Russia is cynically using the issue of Ukrainian grain exports for its ends. And it directly touches upon the question on how we can live together in this world peacefully and with equal opportunities for all humankind. And with the events unfolding since October the 7th in Israel and Gaza, reason and humanity of the global community are being tested yet again. The horrifying images and reports of Hamas' barbaric, dehumanizing attack against mainly Jewish, but also Christian and Arab civilians, against babies, pregnant women, sick and elderly, I think they have shaken us all to the core. Families in Israel are crying for their loved ones brutally murdered or abducted by Hamas. And at the same time, we witness Palestinian parents pulling out their children from the wreckage of buildings, a civilian population in the midst of a battle zone facing a humanitarian disaster of catastrophic dimensions. We hear the cry of agony across the Middle East. We sympathize with the many civilian victims on both sides of the conflict. How could we not? As the world's second largest bilateral humanitarian donor, humanitarian assistance for all in need is an imperative for us everywhere. We have, again, increased our contributions to the Palestine territories and also to UNRWA, whose important work we have been supporting for years as top donor and defended against unfair criticism. And we mourn the death of more than 100 UNRWA colleagues after October the 7th. My minister, as you are all aware, is constantly traveling to the region, and my government has dispatched a special humanitarian envoy who consistently shuttles the region, negotiating humanitarian access and working towards assistance, reaching those most in need. And we have also joined all those trying to find a political solution to interrupt the immediate bloodshed. As you are all aware, my country bears historic responsibility for the Shoah. Israel's existence is for us non-negotiable. Israel, like any other state in the world, has the right to defend itself against terrorism within the boundaries of international law. Addressing the suffering of the Palestinians is in no way contradicts this clear and unwavering stance. It is a key part of it. The task is to fight Hamas, not the Palestinian civilian population. And this is a distinction of utmost importance. Hamas is using Palestinian civilians and the hostages as human shields, deliberately hiding below schools and hospitals. They not only tolerate the ensuing suffering, they intentionally provoke it as it creates breeding ground for hate, revenge, and new terrorism, and feeds its nihilistic ideology. It is not easy to thwart this perfidious strategy by Hamas, whose playbook is not only to bring death and destruction upon the region. Hamas also aims to use its terror to drive a wedge between the Arab states and the West, between the global South and the global North. We need to stand up to this divisive strategy, as it will only make things worse for the Palestinians, for Israel, for all in the region and beyond. That's why it's good to be here today with you at this distinguished dialogue. We need to intensively talk to each other and listen to each other in order to find common ground for a way forward. The essence we can all easily agree on is this: the human suffering in Gaza and Israel, and importantly also in the West Bank, must stop. We have a joint responsibility to continue making every effort to resolve the terrible dilemma on the ground. The prospect of humanitarian pauses is key to this, as the recently adopted important resolution of the Security Council re-emphasized. Far too many children and women have died already. The numbers are appalling and appealed to our shared humanity. People in Gaza urgently need humanitarian access and supply of basic necessities, water, food, medicines, to alleviate their suffering somewhat. Together with our partners, Germany is working tirelessly to find more ways and options to provide effective humanitarian assistance. Much more needs to be done to prevent a humanitarian collapse in Gaza from our side as well, but also Israel must show a much greater deal of flexibility. Even though a lasting solution to the Middle East conflict at this very moment might appear to be a distant prospect, even though the divisions in the world seem to have deepened, and even though we are almost totally immersed in acute crisis management, it is crucial not to lose sight of a longer-term future. The historic opportunity of peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors must not be destroyed, for that is precisely what terrorists want. Normalization efforts like the Abraham Accords break with the decade-long patterns of political behavior that led us nowhere and only prolonged human suffering on all sides. We need to break new grounds. Ladies and gentlemen, our efforts to bring about the release of hostages, to establish humanitarian access to Gaza, or to prevent the violence from spreading to the rest of the region only have a chance of success if we work together, especially with committed and willing Arab Gulf states. Only a renewed focus on the promise of a life side by side in two states can bring Israelis and Palestinians alive in peace, security, and dignity. This is what we all should focus on. Without close involvement and strong commitment of the Gulf states, a lasting solution to the conflict, which to us is a two-state solution, cannot be found. We acknowledge the important role that the Gulf states and the other member states of the Arab League are playing and the commitment they are showing in this regard. The recent joint Arab League and OIC summit in Riyadh was an important impulse for a coordinated process. In this context, Germany also acknowledged the Kingdom of Bahrain's and the United Arab Emirates' continued commitment to a good neighborhood and the Abraham Accords. And even though a lasting and peaceful solution to both wars in Ukraine and Gaza at this moment might appear a very distant prospect, even though the divisions in the world, as I said earlier, have deepened, and even though we are almost totally immersed in this acute crisis management, it is not crucial not to lose sight to the longer-term future. I thank you.
Tobias, thank you very much. And I think the early part of your remarks made me think that one of the challenges we have is maybe managing global cooperation on resolving the Israel-Hamas war. And secondly, I think you did underscore what our two friends on this panel hold dear, which is that the Abraham Accord arrangements are not and should not become an additional casualty of this conflict, but might indeed help strengthen efforts rapidly to revive the effort to establish a two-state solution. So with that, I'm pleased to say we've got a number of people who wish to take the floor. I'll take 9 or 10 and then return to the panel. Rim Momtaz, please.
Thank you, John. I have a question for Dr. Gargash and Dr. Al-Zayani. As two countries that normalize with Israel without imposing conditions related to the Palestinian issue, how responsible are you about what Dr. Al-Gargash said called the containment of the Palestinian issue? And he spoke about the need for problem solving right now. What are you two countries going to do concretely when it comes to the governance of Gaza after the end of this war? And to Dr. Lindner, just a simple question: is Israel's current operation in Gaza in compliance with international law? Thank you.
Thank you. And from the UAE, Khalifa Al-Suwaidi. Go ahead.
Hello. Hi. My question is for Anwar Gargash, Dr. Anwar Gargash, Your Excellency. Just bear with me. My question relates to striking a healthy balance between competition and collaboration. Could you please shed light on the UAE's formula for navigating such a global order that is in a constant state of flux? Thank you very much.
And from Germany and CDU, Johan Wadefuhl.
Thank you, Sir John. Thank you very much. Since I'm a German, I would ask Tobias Lindner, because I have the opportunity to do it weekly in Berlin. But to the other two panelists, please. If I follow the conference rightly, I see a lot of support for a cessation of violence. If you call it a pause, a long-lasting pause, however, and I also see a lot of support, and I think we all agree that there shall be a two-state solution. But what has to happen in the time in between, after the cessation of using weapons? Do you see any opportunity that these countries here from the region, from the Gulf states, from the Arab League, that they take more responsibility, especially for the Gaza Strip in the forthcoming time? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And from the Netherlands and the IISS, Verlin Owens.
Thank you, Sir John. My question is to Dr. Gargash. There's been a lot of news this year of the growing ties between the UAE and China, including the first ever joint military drill involving your air forces in Falcon Shield 2023. My question is, do you think that a security partnership with China might be advantageous for the UAE as a hedging strategy, or is that not in the cards for the time being? Thank you.
And from the UK and also the IISS, John Rain.
Thank you, John. Dr. Gargash, where do events in Gaza leave the UAE's zero problems foreign policy?
Thank you. And Khalid Juma, Bahrain.
In recent weeks, and again earlier this morning, we've seen multiple world leaders and state representatives lament the inconsistent application of international law. How does this perceived unequal application of international law affect the behavior of non-state actors, and how does it affect our region's stability and the international rule-based order? Thank you.
Iman Raga from Egypt.
Thank you. My question is for Dr. Gargash. How do you see the future of the I2U2 bloc that has UAE, Israel, India, and the United States as members? And after the war in Gaza period, do you think that it will be open to other Arabian and Gulf countries to join as members? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We might have time for about 5 or 6 more before I need to close the session, but I might, since there are quite a lot of questions already, come back to the panel in the order in which I felt they had the most questions. So Anwar Gargash first, then Tobias, and then Abdul Latif. A couple of minutes each before we go back. Anwar.
I don't see the flow of questions as any competition popularity.
No,
I assure you. But I think number one is, I think again, the question was on the Abrahamic Accords, really. And I think the important thing is we need to do two things at the same time. I think number one is, as I said, we need to go beyond containment. And at the same time, we need to also understand that in many ways, the UAE, when it comes to the Palestinian issue, does not really run a foreign policy that is isolated really from our allies in the region, our sort of moderate core. We refer, for example, in the Gaza crisis now, to Egypt, to Jordan, and so on and so forth. What is important to them is also important to us. There's no doubt that the war in Gaza is a setback for moderation. There's no doubt about it. I have to come and say that it gives radicalization a platform, a podium. There's no doubt about it. But I think also in the longer term, it gives us a major issue here. That major indication is we need to really address a problem. We need to look at the borders. I mean, if you look historically, and I was reading recently a few books on the history of the crisis and some biographies, etc. Israel has always been averse at trying to define its borders. Even in 1956, for example, Ben Gurion was not completely happy about withdrawing completely from Sinai. So that aversion has to be addressed. We cannot have that sort of ambiguity about what constitutes an independent Palestinian state. We cannot, in many ways, not address these borders. We cannot accept a UN resolution and say a two-state solution, but at the same time find out that that two-state solution is permeated by settlements and so on and so forth, and is not ready there. I think some of the statements also that we hear now from the Israeli Prime Minister and indeed the Israeli President about the sort of longer-term Israeli connection to Gaza. They are very worrying, to be honest, because I think that this indicates that perhaps the lesson that we as the majority of people in the region are taking away from the Gaza crisis, which is the need to go back to a two-state solution. We need to go back to an Israeli and Palestinian state living side by side. That lesson is perhaps not being the same lesson that the Israeli far right or indeed the radical groups on the Arab side are actually taking out from the Gaza conflict. And that, I think, is the danger. The danger is we need to come back and keep our compass, all of us as responsible members of the international community, in the right direction. And the right direction is we need to resolve this, and we need to actually come and be very frank with the Israelis. What are the borders that you are accepting? What are these borders that you have tried, as I said, you've been averse to during partition in 1967 and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not trying to on the Abrahamic Accords thing. I think when we signed that agreement, and I was part of the team that was working on the agreement, we had a very clear concession from the Netanyahu government at the time, which was the issue of hold back on the annexation of Palestinian territories. And I think this was something that was quite, some people might make something lesser of the issue right now, but at that time this was an acute threat, really, further reinforcing the same sort of land grab that has been part of the Palestinian issue. Can I take a little bit more time because I have a couple of things?
I think the most important question is, Johan Wadefuls, on what happens in that in-between time. If one succeeds in stopping the conflict, one won't jump immediately into a two-state solution. So how is that in-between time managed?
Again, I mean, I have to, sometimes I think the questions are being asked of us in the UAE or indeed any other country. We are within an Arab consensus. We're not an independent solo player, politically or diplomatically. We are guided by, number one, the countries that are immediately with borders with the Palestinian Authority, with Israel, Jordan, Egypt, etc. What they think is extremely important to us, what Saudi Arabia thinks is extremely important to us. And I think we are, in many ways, a supporting actor to that Arab consensus. Sometimes, of course, we have our initiatives, but I think it should be understood in that sort of framework. You don't have 22 Arab countries all of them with 22 different policies towards the Palestinian issues. You have an Arab consensus, and people within that consensus have a certain margin of movement there. I think clearly right now there are clear priorities. Number one priority, as I said earlier, is the humanitarian. I mean, what is really arriving in Gaza is dismal. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, to sustain this population that is being bombarded every day, the images that we see mostly on Arab TV and somehow are sanitized perhaps in some of the Western channels or some of the Western social media is abhorring. I mean, it really is tragic. It is inhumane. And this is the first thing that we need to do. We need this unfettered access for humanitarian support. I mean, I can't explain that after Hamas's, horrible attack really on civilians, that 5,000 women and 3,000 plus Palestinian kids were killed. I mean, I don't understand the rationale here between these events. So I think that is essential. I think the second thing is the longer the crisis takes, the more danger we have of a regional crisis spiraling out of control. And I think we have to be very, very careful about it. Then, of course, coming to your next question, and I've been, hearing different things. I think we need to be guided by the Palestinians. I mean, we can't really come and sit down and say the next step will be, some sort of a de facto administration over Gaza, or the PA should do this and that. I think we need to be guided by the Palestinians. If we are not guided by the Palestinians, whatever we do will just not be legitimate. And I think the issue of legitimacy is extremely important in the next step. So I think that is essential. I have a question on China and other things,
one.
but
Yes.
you want me to do the China one?
Yeah, do the China
I can do
one.
the China one. I think on China, again, if we know that there is no U.S. vacuum in the region, if we know that there is a U.S. commitment to its allies in the region, I don't think we are looking to hedge our, long-term security, regional security plans with anything to do with China. I mean, you mentioned the exercise. These exercises are done, they are routine. We do exercises with various countries, whether they are naval or whether they are air exercises. I don't think they signal anything. I think people are reading too much from this. But I think ultimately, the sort of regional security architecture for the UAE and relevant to other countries in the Gulf, although I don't want to speak on everybody's behalf, will be determined really by how committed is our traditional ally of the past 30, 40 years for the next 30, 40 years. Will that sort of, unspoken sort of unofficial commitment, can we turn that into concrete commitments that we can actually rely on? If these are the things that we can do, I really don't see that we are hedging there. I think the link that we have with China, or in fact with India and others, is more of a policy that wants to build bridges, more economic, more technological, with every part of the world. But I think if we are secure in our, secure in a U.S. commitment to the security of the region long term, I don't see why we should change what has proven quite efficient for us over the years. I mean, there are tweaks here and there, but I think this is where we are really.
Anwar, thank you very much. So 2 minutes to Tobias, and if Abdulatif, you have something, and then we come back to the audience. But Tobias?
Okay, I'm trying to be as quick as I can.
Yeah.
And so I think it's obvious that nothing justifies what happened on October the 7th. But if we want to really defeat terrorism in the region, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, all those groups. We need to have not only a plan for the day after the military operation in Gaza, as Johan Wadepoel asked, but we need to have a long-term perspective to the Palestinians. If they are losing, especially the young generation, their perspective, and Anwar Gargash is totally right on containment, or let's say a delay of the Palestinian issue. If we do not have that perspective, we will not be able to fight or to destroy Hamas just by military means. I think that's the important point, and I think that's the common ground we are all on, that a two-state solution is the only way for just and lasting peace in the region. And a quick comment on the issue of international humanitarian law. Imagine that if on my country more than 10,000 rockets would have been fired, for sure Germany would defend itself. And I believe every country in that room would say if we would have been attacked, would defend ourselves. The international law, the Charter of the UN Charter is not a menu a la carte where you can do cherry picking. There is a right for self-defense. But at the same time, we have seen and recognized the resolution of the Security Council. And that resolution is very clear when it comes to humanitarian pauses, when it comes to the humanitarian situation. And that resolution is binding, to be also clear on that. And as I said in my speech, it requires more flexibility from Israel than we have seen to the present. Thank you.
Abdatif?
Well, thank you, Sir John. I think right now, we're always, or all are saying, the day after. I think the day after is today. We should start working on the day after today. The earlier we can achieve it, the better it is. Let's not have it just a target in the future and just watch what is unfolding in front of our eyes. What does Palestine need? What do the Palestinians need? Right now, they want the basic right, the basic human right, their right to live, their right to stay alive. Can this be part of the next day, or should it be part of today? They need a cessation of hostilities. They need a sustained enough humanitarian supplies. Right now, today. They need medical aid. They need medical treatments. They need to ensure that they are not forced to be displaced. They need, we say hope. Definitely they do. Otherwise, many of those children or orphans who will grow up, I don't know what will they be having. They will have anger, and they will be thirsty for blood, for revenge. Is this what we want? I really like to ask the audience, is there anybody who doesn't believe in the two-state solution in the world? Is there anybody who doesn't believe in the two-state solution? We need to work collectively and comprehensively to achieve that objective. That's the strategic objective for resolving the long-standing conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But we need to work together. We need to use all tools available. And if we can increase those tools, let it be. Let's find ways of having more tools to get to that state where a two-state solution is acceptable. But that's what the Palestinians want. What do the region want? The region wants a safe, secure, developed region. We need to work also on it right from today. We called for international conference. International conference cannot be just one event in time. with a document, communique, declaration, and then no implementation plan. I think it should be a full, rounded a conference, call it forum, call it effort, and should be continuous. There should be a sustained peace, a viable, independent, sovereign Palestine, secured also at the same time, and secured Israel. And also we look at the overall range. So
thanks, Abdul Latif. I'm going to bring a couple more
Sure,
in, and we'll get another shot. So coming back to the floor for about 3 or 4 more from Jordan, Ali Sharif Nasser bin Nasser.
Yes, thank you to all the panelists. I think my question is to all of you is what chance does the Arab world and Europe stand to reach some kind of political settlement to this conflict in light of the current US and Israeli approach, which is increasingly seen through a prism of prism of security, which reminds me of the saying that when all you have left is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom Beckett.
Thank you, John. In a country not far from the occupied Palestinian territories, more than 300,000 civilians have been killed over the last decade. Half the population has been displaced, and 14 million people are in need of humanitarian support. That's Syria, al-Assad, supported by Russia. Was it wise, does the panel think it was wise to readmit Syria to the Arab League earlier this year?
And from Japan, Yuka Koshino.
Thank you, John. I think that I have a question to Dr. Gargash. You talked about the links of geopolitical competition and also geoeconomics and the stability in the region. And I think the UAE has been engaging with the Indo-Pacific or joining new institutions like BRICS. So could you elaborate on those expectations and perhaps the role of BRICS in the shared prosperity in the region, how to achieve a shared prosperity, how it contributes to the shared prosperity in the region that you mentioned? Thank you.
Cheyenne Taladmi from UK.
Thank you. My question is for Their Excellencies Dr. Zayani and Dr. Gargash. Dr. Gargash, you referenced or you asked the question of whether this is a sort of Iraq moment. In light of the sort of unique position of your governments in the Abrahamic Accords, but also where you are situated in the region, how do you and how do your governments foresee or how are you foreseeing and adapting solutions to countering radicalization and extremism specifically, particularly in more volatile contexts in the region and with long-standing issues such as what Tom Beckett just referenced in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen. So just zooming out a little bit of the current conflict.
Thank you very much. Hassan Al-Hassan from Bahrain.
Thank you very much. My question is addressed to Doctors Gargash and Al-Zayani. Ambassador Yusuf Ateba, the UAE's ambassador in Washington, D.C., said several weeks ago, prior to the onset of the current conflict, he confessed that the Abraham Accords, in fact, failed to get Israel to live up to its commitment of suspending the expansion of settlements in the West Bank. Are the UAE and Bahrain willing to take incremental diplomatic steps, recalling ambassadors, lowering levels of representation, imposing trade investment sanctions, considering even potentially a suspension of diplomatic relations, to exert pressure on Israel to stop the carnage against Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank? Thank you.
And finally from Egypt, Shadwa Ismat.
Thank you so much. I agree to His Excellency Dr. Zayani's statement that the day after is today. And I agree to Dr. Gargash's statement that the longer the crisis, the longer the violence, and the longer the escalation. So my question comes, what's next? When an actions can actually be taken? when the international words and the Security Council resolution is already taken but it's not implemented. So whom we are expecting that will help putting an end to that war? Thank you so much.
Brilliant. I think we should come back. We've got about 6 minutes before we need to close for lunch. Anwar Gargash, Abdulatif Al-Zayani, and Tobias Sintner.
Connect the Syria issue with recalling ambassadors. I think this is connected. I think we have found through our sort of diplomatic process is that instant gratification is not the solution in politics. Communication is the solution in politics. So not at every major crisis, and Gaza is definitely a major crisis, we go to instant gratification. I think we maintain links, and I think this was, although it's a different context, of course, but this is one of the lessons of the Syria episode. And I was there in the Arab League many, many years ago, and I think we lost complete leverage, we lost complete communication with what happened with Syria, created a vacuum, and as a result, the Arab sort of role within the Syria crisis was really inconsequential for the next 8, 9, 10 years. So instant gratification is not always the solution. Again, the current leverage that we have is leverage that we are using as much as we can in humanitarian. But this leverage will also grow at some stage. So the answer to these things is sometimes in politics, you don't run things through your heart. You run them through your mind, to be honest, Difficult, but I think that's the way that things go, and that is the way that we need to manage that issue. That's really our conclusion. Vis-a-vis the BRICS question, I think there's been a lot of speculation on the UAE. Again, the issue of hedging. Is this another hedging process? No, it is not. I think the BRICS today for us is another set of communications and bridges with various countries, various forums. And, following the Arab Spring, following COVID, we have re-examined also what are the priorities of our foreign policy. And a major priority of our foreign policy is we need to have links all over. We need to be able to talk to everybody. We need to be able to use these relationships, whether for our own priorities or for regional priorities. So again, does that extend to the security sphere? As I said, if we are assured of the U.S. commitment moving forward, I don't think there is any reason for us to change course. Is it an Iraq moment? I don't know. I'm just worried that it is. I really don't know. I think it's too early, to be honest. But I think what is happening in the region, we have to be very careful. Today, the same voices that are critical of the UAE are critical of Jordan, are critical of Egypt, are critical of Saudi Arabia. This is really an onslaught within Arab public opinion and in some of the social media circle. It is really an onslaught on Arab moderation. We have to take charge. We should not allow the Palestinian issue on the Israeli side to be run by the extreme right. And we have seen where the extreme right has led this issue. And on our side also, this issue should not be run by militias and quasi-militias. We should take charge. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Jordan and other countries in the Arab League, we have to take charge, because for us, there is a fundamental attack on the moderate stance of moderate Arab states. And moderate Arab states, together, we need to come out with solutions. We need to take charge. We need to be the initiators of what is going on right now. Because to be honest, what we are really seeing on the Arab sort of public opinion spectrum, it's the same onslaught really on Arab moderation, the Arab center. And the Arab center has to deliver on a two-state solution on the Palestinian issue. And the Arab moderate center has to be the one that actually stands up to extremism and radicalism, etc. But I think also we need US leadership on this issue. The US also role is extremely important. We need also for Europe to be sympathetic to the Palestinians. We understand the historical German sympathy with Israel, but we need more sympathy also with the plight of the Palestinians. This is essential in many ways. And at the same time, the Israelis also, if they are on a course of right-wing politics, such as the one we have seen over the last 15 years, is going to be disastrous. And I mean, we're seeing these crises every year or two. I mean, this is the largest in scale, but we have been in perpetual crisis mode, really, in Gaza and in the West Bank. And this is not sustainable.
Abdul Latif, thank you.
Thank you, John. This time I'll be short. Regarding Syria, we've already said we need a collective, all the peoples of the region are to be involved in resolving and steering the future for the region. So we need everybody to be engaged, and we need a collective and comprehensive really approach to achieve the two-state solution. Syria's and the relationship with Syria is also important. The Abraham Accord, contrary, as I said, we need tools to be able to work with, to achieve our political objective that we will all determine based on if we can get the International Peace Conference with the leadership of the United States achieved. What is next? I think the most important now is really the cessation of hostilities and trying to save lives. And I believe that the Abu Mazen, the president, in his remarks during the Islamic Arab Summit said the next will be election, etc. So once the international conference is established, that will lay down the process forward. But as I said, it has to be pragmatic. It can be implemented this time, and really enough is enough. We have to solve it this time. It has to be solved.
Thank you very much. And Tobias.
Thank you so much, John. So 2 quick comments. First of all, on Syria. You know, Germany is not a member of the Arab League, so it was not our decision to readmit Syria. We just have to respect it, although I have a different position. But if we are honest, did we have seen any change of policy from Mr. Assad now? I doubt. So, you know, we are giving lots of humanitarian aid to the Syrian people because we have to take care about the people. But we are fully committed to a step-by-step approach, meaning that everything that goes beyond humanitarian aid needs some credible steps from Mr. Assad in a change of his policy. I do not expect him to become like the Prime Minister of Sweden or something like that. But what I do expect is, for instance, a release of political prisoners, for instance. On the region, one final remark, because Anwar Gargash touched on it. You know, our relationship as Germans to Israel can be good or bad, easy or complicated. It will be always special. But that speciality does not mean that we are not outspoken, for instance, when it comes to settlement policies in the West Bank or to settler violence. If we are all committed to a two-state solution, that also means that there shouldn't be some steps like settlement expansion that make a two-state solution impossible. That's one of my concerns. And I believe sitting here together in Manama, you know, we can spend the time for hours in finding out where we disagree or where we might have different positions, but that bring us not forward. That does not stop the civilian killings. So let's focus on those things we have in common, and that's a two-state solution. That's a humanitarian situation. And I very much understand that the Arab countries, that they need countries like mine to support your approach. At the same time, we need you, and you said the moderate positions. We need those moderate, pragmatic positions to come forward here in your region. And I can assure you, we are not one-sided. We care about the fate of the Palestinian people. We are the second largest humanitarian donor here in the region for decades. So we care about the Palestinians, and we look forward to working with you on a political perspective. I thank you.
Thank you very much. So I conclude with one answer and two questions. The answer I conclude with is that strategic hedging will not be needed if strategic trust with traditional partners is reinforced. And the two questions are, who takes charge in the region and through what diplomatic instrument to accelerate the path to a two-state solution? And the second question I'm left with is, does diplomatic inclusion result in improved strategic behavior? Maybe we'll get more answers to those two questions by Sunday noon, but now it's 12:25. We have 5 minutes to get to lunch. Please thank our speakers very kindly. Thank you very much.